Does Edward Hopper mean anything to you?
This is one of those hoppers, whose reputation precedes it.
Yeah.
And so you know a lot about it. You sort of know how you should feel about it, that it's ominous.
Yeah.
That it's iconic, and it's also a Simpsons homage.
It's a meme. It's a gimmick. Yeah. It's so many homages at this point.
And there's always a crowd around it, and so it's actually difficult to sort of step up and observe what's really there.
But for me, all the ominousness and the kind of interior, the loneliness of this painting is dwarfed now by the fact that there is a diner that's open in the middle of the night, which is my Valhalla at this point. So to me, this is simply at this point in time in 2024, this is simply a depiction of a joyous America where anything is possible, and even lonely souls have a shelter that they can rest in.
They say he began it shortly after Pearl Harbor. And for once, you can believe them. The silences of this painting are the silences of a nation. They are Pearl Harbor silences, the silences of a history we can't quite refuse to recognize as our own. Call it kitsch if you must. But once you see Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, you can't unsee Edward Hopper's Nighthawks. And once you see Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, you can't unhear Edward Hopper's Nighthawks. The silence, as deafening as the scream of another nation's famous painting, is soundless. Was he inspired by a diner in Greenwich? His wife said so, but nobody has been able to find that diner. If it existed, it was known only to the artist. The diner in this painting is named Philly's, and it could exist in any city where, for some people, it is always the middle of the night. Could exist right here, where my guest and I now stand, and where the painting has stood since its debut in 1942. Or it could exist in that city with no state, the city that's all state, the city where my guest and I first and last met at the cusp of millennial adulthood under the harsh glow of fluorescent bulbs. Unconsciously, probably, I was painting the loneliness of a large city. You are listening to Filthy Armenian Adventures.
I don't know that I believe the human situation here.
Okay, how would you describe the human situation?
We've got 3 patrons and a server.
Yeah.
And no one seems to be warm with one another.
No.
The conversation that's going on seems obligatory at best. Is his hand touching her hand there? They are awfully close.
It's not, because the depth-wise, his cigarette is out in front, and hers is behind. So, oh, you mean like, yeah, they're not touching hands, I don't think. And his other hand seems to be down on his knee, in the manner of such men. But there is
So it's the world of noir.
It's a very noir world. It's the world of a clean, well-lighted place.
Yes. Yeah, it's true. But you and I would be talking.
We would.
There would be hands in the air.
Of course we would, but we're a different sort of people, though. I mean, this is, we were talking in Washington D.C. where nobody talks except about the farm subsidy and that was the most miserable. Well, we'll talk about that. That was the most.
Yeah, we're talking a lot.
Yeah, we talked a lot in Washington D.C., but I didn't talk to anybody else.
State City wants policies. State City wants documents. State City likes lists. State City will pay for research. State City has no interest in search. If search is your thing, this can be a very lonely city indeed, and the loneliness won't be painted on you unconsciously. If research is your thing, then great. Let's go to happy hour in DuPont Circle. But if search is your thing, and you end up here, you must be lost. Or maybe you were voted in somehow, and it's your constituency that's lost. How did you get here? Why is it always the middle of the night? Is there someplace open? Can anyone hear you? Come to think of it, D.C. is where I first learned to take it black.
Oh, you think it's like air? It's like
I don't think he painted
it
glass.
right.
Clearly, as it rounds,
Right.
he's doing something with the paint to suggest glass.
there's also no entrance,
It's true.
which is I think something that is commonly noted, but nevertheless, it's kind of like a snow globe.
Yes. Let's shake it up.
Yeah. What happens if you shake it up? What'll come down if you shake it up?
I think coffee.
Coffee is exactly what I was going to say.
Ash.
Yeah, coffee, ash, maybe a pistol or two. And then the weird positioning of the third guy, not of the third patron. None of them are with each other. I mean, well, yeah. There's the mystery of do the women and men, does the woman and the man know each other? Which their positioning indicates they do, since it's such a empty place. But it's like, is he her pimp? No. Is he? There's something oddly professional or detached about them, yet they appear to be together.
They're so well dressed. That's what students will always point out. If you show any movie or photograph,
Right.
from the 20s, 30s, 40s,
Right.
50s,
No one's dressed like schlub like me. You're still keeping it up.
that's the first thing that students will notice. They're also well dressed.
They're also well dressed.
Why are they so dressed up?
Yeah. They wouldn't leave the house looking like we do now. They would go to movies. You'd see it in I Love Lucy episodes when they go to a movie. She said, wear your coat and tie.
Yeah. Even the little tramp is in a suit, It doesn't fit him.
Right. And then the way they look like sailors, the way the Marsh, he kind of looks like a sailor. And if you go to, you can still see this if you go to, I don't know if you still can, but in the Apple Pan, I don't know if you've ever been to the Apple Pan in L.A., if you've ever been to L.A., period.
Twice.
You've been to it. Well, it's one of these it's a famous old burger diner stand. It's similar, just a counter. Mm-hmm. It's been there for I think since literally 1942 or 44 or something, and they still wear the white, thing and the white this, and overall it doesn't. This particular way he's bending over, and the angle of everything makes him especially look like a sailor. But I guess that was a look.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting observation. It immediately makes me think of other Popper paintings of sailors. But this is, I think that even in his sailing pictures, there is a stillness to them.
And then the two coffee things in the back. Oh,
yes.
Lots of coffee that's ready for anyone to come in. There's only 3 people. Now you go in, and they're going to close in an hour and a half, and they don't got any coffee left, and it's beyond them. Or it's cold, and it's beyond them to brew a fresh pot in 2 minutes.
Endless coffee.
Endless coffee is the point.
Do you think that if you start to imagine music playing, on a wireless or something in there, that it sort of changes the tone of the painting itself, such that if jazz music is playing, their stillness no longer becomes ominous.
It would indicate that they're lost in the music.
Exactly. Yeah. They're being entertained.
They're being entertained, and
their silence is not
right,
rude or cold. It's meditative, or it's pleasurable.
Yeah, or introspective in a appropriate manner. That's not. I mean, there's another option, which is that they're listening to radio news from the war.
Sure. Yeah.
And concentrating on
Sure. In the same way that now we can't imagine life without screens. I wonder if something comparable about music,
right,
in paintings and in art before the screen took over everything.
Although it from what I can divine, I don't know. Like when you read Tom Wolfe in the 60s, and he says like the concept of 24/7 music in public places was basically invented by Las Vegas in the 60s. And so, I mean, I'm sure this can be figured out with a little bit of research, but I don't know that they had music blasting everywhere back in the 40s. I think the assumption is that
Still mostly live music or nothing.
it's live or nothing, or if something is playing, it's because if there's an important thing on the radio, maybe they're playing it, they're turning it up, there's a boxing match, there's something else. I've seen that depicted, but they don't really have the equipment to have kind of easily playing music all the time back then. But what time is this? It's got to be 3 a.m.
It's got to be.
It looks like 3 a.m. time. So did they have another one? I remember they had here was the Ecstasy of St. Francis.
I don't know where that was.
That would be in, I guess, Renaissance-ish. But I don't care. I mean,
Graham Wood, American Gothic.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. American Gothic.
Iconic one here in the American
Ah, yes, American Gothic. Well, you must have some feelings about American Gothic because it hits a little bit. I mean,
I really don't. I mean, that's more of a Midwestern scene.
That's true.
than a Southern scene.
yeah, it's very pure. It's very puritanical.
The comparable,
Pure tyranny.
The comparable Southern scene in the same time period, it would be much dirtier, sweatier. This is farm life without humidity.
Right. It's dry air. Yeah.
I mean, I got a little bit acquainted with him through doing grad school at the University of Iowa, where he taught for many, many years.
Oh, no kidding. Was
And
he
so-
like a prep? Just like
He taught in the art department there, and so they had the university collection is filled with grand wood. And he had, even though we don't think of him as being progressive stylistically, there's abstraction in his landscapes, and he was an important person to Jackson Pollock, and a lot of those abstract expressions.
is any of that evident in this one?
I don't think so. I mean, of course, like the Hopper, it's this human interaction between the two
Yeah.
poses the puzzle
Yeah.
endlessly, right?
And the middle of the pitchfork is the middle of the painting, I believe, right? There's a certain symmetrical precision to the whole thing.
I think Seamus Haney or somebody said that he was always writing about things, going from the palpable to the abstract, or the opposite way around. He said that the pitchfork was just the most perfect.
Right.
image.
Right. It's also got that. It's also got the number 3 in it, and it's got the trilogy, the Triton. It's a Triton. It's
got the myth there.
It's got the myth. It's got the severity of a like.
I wonder, is that why Pitchfork, the music publication, was called Pitchfork? It's founded here in Chicago.
Yeah, that's true.
Here's maybe the most iconic painting at the artist. Probably not. I don't know.
I mean,
The pitchfork in their logo seems more devilish.
yeah. Unfortunately, I wouldn't trust that their taste is even so subtle as to have been inspired by Grant Wood versus a bitchy satanic imagery that they had in mind, because they're imagining that people are going to skewer the album. Didn't they go out of business just now?
They got, they're one of those publications that Condé Nast gobbled up, and then Condé Nast folded them into GQ.
Okay.
But from what I gather from the actual online publication, nothing much has changed yet. Maybe that's
Maybe there were layoffs. Maybe there was something. Yeah.
It's a beloved publication. It's a niche. And, although it's not been the same publication for years and years. I don't know. Writing about music.
Yeah. Well, there were
Very
just
few
some
places to do it anymore.
Right. Where does one do it?
I don't know.
Real Marcus is on Substack now, so
Yeah, I know. There's 20 years he's moving around from publication to publication.
yeah. He went to LA Review of Books, where I was like, that's where, and it was pure. It was pure coincidence that I ended up having him on my show, because he turned out to be friends with David Thompson, who I've known now for a while. And
I listened to the David Thompson episode. That was wonderful.
yeah, isn't he great?
I mean,
I've done 3 of them with him now.
this is a person who, I think I listened to the last one that you did with him.
Yeah,
This is a person who, writes books faster than I read them.
I know. I can't believe it. I just got another one in the mail that he just wrote about, like war and film and war movies. He writes them. He has to write them. He was explaining. He has to write them to keep himself sane, which makes sense to me. He has to like write. The fact that he can do it is, I mean, I guess how else do you produce so much but as a motor for some, to maintain some sort of hold on the world. I understand.
Yeah, it seems as essential for him as breathing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like breathing is writing for him.
Yeah.
That's enviable, man.
It is, because
I'm in absolute awe of David Thompson.
I am too, and he's so that the first episode I did with him, which was a couple years ago now. My cover is an Edward Hopper painting. The cover of the thing I did was the New York. What is it called? New York Cinema House, New York Movie House.
Yeah,
something.
I know the one.
I have it I also have it in my apartment. A print of it, because it feels apt.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites, I guess. Greel writes a lot too. I mean, but he doesn't write books the way Thompson is writing books every single morning.
Yeah, I know.
Greel Thompson is listening to music, watching movies, and
How does it work for David Thompson with actually watching movies? Because he seems to have watched most of the movies that come out.
Yeah, he watches
I don't
them.
know if that's still the case, but certainly it was for a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, there's always more than you can watch, but
2 a day? Is it?
That's a good
does
question.
He have
How
a
many?
regime? What's
He watches them after he writes, that's for sure, because he writes the first thing in the morning. So he watches them in the afternoons and evenings. And he probably can, this is a good question. I never thought to ask him, how many in a day does he maximally watch?
Yeah.
I should ask him that next time, because it's a good question. I would guess that 2 is the max.
2 a day.
Yeah, because I think that the brain, it's hard after 2.
So, I definitely have been mostly influenced, probably to my detriment, by sort of auteurist critics and theory. And what I appreciate about David Thompson is that he brings me back to performance.
Yeah.
He likes directors, but he loves performers.
Yeah, he loves that. His books on acting, he has a book on acting from like 2014, 2015. I think it's just called On Acting.
Yeah.
It's really good. Because he also is, unlike the theory schmeary people, he's not afraid to be, pardon the expression, but horny for actors and actresses. And
Yeah, he's in love with people.
if you're not in love with them, it's just like you're missing the whole point of this medium.
Yeah.
If you're not falling in love with them. So,
And in that sense, he's a callback to the Golden Era and what drew many people to the movies in the first place.
yeah.
And I don't think it's the same thing anymore.
No. No, it happens once in a while. There are people who break through that, I try to comment when I see it happening, but the people who really break through and you can sense they capture the romantic imagination of an audience. But it is rare now. It's just not happening very frequently. The pretty people that are first of all, there's just been a severe rollback in how many beautiful people are even put on screen. So that's one problem. And then when they are put on screen, they haven't necessarily had the overall charisma that prior beautiful people have had. But there are little, exceptions here and there that trickle out, and one should appreciate them. But without that, you're removing the entire point of anybody made, participated in, directed, or watched movies. They all did it for that, and that was the topic of my first episode with David. He wrote a book called Sleeping with Strangers about sex in the movies, which was somewhat. He released somewhat. He kind of curtailed it at places or apologized in places in the shadow of Me Too. And my mission when I went up in the first episode was to counter that and say he had nothing to be sorry for. And, it occurred to me. I hope this isn't but it occurred to me that you met your wife in the workplace, and she was an intern.
That's true.
And in today's world, you would have never been able to meet the woman of your dreams, or you wouldn't have been out to date her.
Yeah.
So,
well, I was certainly nervous about that. And so it didn't hurt that I'm just a year older than her.
I know, and thankfully.
And I had been in internship this semester, or whatever,
right before.
prior. But yeah, I mean,
But it wouldn't have made a difference now. It would have still been like some, like I felt like there would have been like eyes that would have been on it, and people in ears and discord, and sad, It's just the world has gone off a cliff in some ways, and that's one of them. I feel as an independent observer.
What horrified me most about D.C. was not that it's a swamp. I was prepared for that. But that it was a desert, an imagination desert, smack dab in the middle of everywhere. A place where every spiritual excitement I was raised to feel, every cultural fight song I was raised to sing, every sense that the world placed some value on creativity, individuality, art, beauty, literature, truth, all of it was shown to be worthless. It was like living through an enormous shrinking. Honey, I Shrunk the culture. It was a town where for the first time I encountered people who earnestly, enthusiastically argued against the concept of a soul. But you know all this. You know all this. The question isn't why the swamp sucks. The question is how, as a nation and an individual, to survive it. Of what does the anti-DC-dote consist? I submit for your consideration Drew Bratcher, the first millennial, the galley proof, the review copy, found today standing before a masterpiece at the Art Institute of Chicago. It is the first time we have seen each other in 14 years. It is the first time we have spoken to each other outside of Washington, D.C., where we first met as colleagues at a lifestyle magazine which had given up on style and was only barely clinging to life. We had arrived there from different places. He just north of Nashville, I just west of Westwood, he from the land of textured country, I from the land of dense illusion. But we recognized each other's quest, and there was a likeness to the Great Recession limps with which we moved, even as, having found requited love, Drew was not further enfeebled by the illusion that one could escape the concept of constituency. His constituency lies just north of Nashville. It comprises his family, the country, and its songs, the songs that speak between generations, passing along secrets too deep or dangerous to teach. Unlike many a writer's constituency, this is not a cast of losers, addicts, and whores, desperate for literary welfare. Of them it is not sufficient to bark working class or middle class. Salacious plot lines, if they form at all, happen in the background. In the foreground are solid characters, rooted even when lost, glittering with certain kinds of soil, living non-genre lives of quiet mystery, their quests hidden, their complexities disguised, revealed only upon the most faithful examination. Bub, Essays from Just North of Nashville, Drew's first book published just a couple years ago, brings that examination to bear. The people of Drew's constituency, like the people of every childhood, are largely mythic. They start out as giants. If we're lucky, they turn into heroes. And if we're really lucky, they end as frail wizards we can hardly bear to bid goodbye. They hold jobs like coal miner, repo man, country music star. It's hard to see them as people just like us. We worship them. We fear them, we resent them, and we very often resent ourselves for how we treat them, especially when we ignore them because their presence has become too much. They are the gardeners of our innocence, and when we escape the garden, they're all that's left to remind us how innocent we once might have been. Some of us even get to name these creatures. I named my grandmother Dee Dee. Drew named his grandfather Bub. Only Drew didn't just name him. He drew him, and he did it with much more than crayons. Bub, Essays from Just North of Nashville, brings to life a constituency which, much like my own, held fading currency in the city where Drew Bratcher and I met in the spring of 2008. The last spring America would know before Barack Obama. Hey everyone, it's your host Alec Mohibian with a quick note before we begin. Filthy Armenian Adventures is an interdimensional travel program that takes you deep into the cultural mysteries of our strange and interesting times. In search of truth, in search of gold, in search of lost friends and unsung heroes, in search of John Galt's motor. The show is supported entirely by patrons at patreon.com/filthyarmenian. Patrons get access to twice as many adventures, including the most intimate and scandalous ones, plus regular 5 to 15 minute smoke break mini episodes on movies, shows, and topics of the urgent moment. Patrons also get first dibs on our next live event. The first two were a smash. It's very easy to keep Filthy Armenian Adventures alive. You can still listen to the premium feed on Apple or Spotify or your favorite app, and you can do so with the pride that you're putting a little bit of money where your soul is. More patrons means more landmarks, more hotspots, more secret locations, and forbidden territories around the world, and the world that is Los Angeles, our apocalyptic headquarters. It means we'll be able to track down more enchanting figures in the landscape and dare them to abandon their masks. Patreon.com/filthyarmenian. Gracias for listening, and enjoy the show.
I watched a film last night, late at night. I've gotten in terrible patterns this summer that I'm going to have to undo here as the semester starts again, but, you know, just staying up way too late. But I drink too much coffee at night.
Welcome to my world, man.
I can't hold a candle to you, but...
Well, someone has to keep night watch, you know.
I still have to get up early.
Right, that's right.
After these nights. But
that's the hard part.
Late last night I watched this movie that, heard the buzz about these two Senegalese boys who try to get to Europe from Libya over to Italy, called Io Capitano. Have you heard anything about this?
No.
And so at the center of this movie, there's these two cousins from Senegal. They're like 15 and 16 years old, I believe. They have it. They have that charisma.
Yeah.
I couldn't stop watching these guys, you know?
Yeah.
Just expressive and believable and...
This is a new movie?
Yeah, it's a new movie. And just their faces are works of art, worthy of being in this museum that we're in right now.
Yeah.
So you know it when you see it, and you're thankful for it when you encounter it.
Yeah, a face goes a long way. Just a face that is...
Yeah, how few movies let you linger on a face for any length of time?
Right. Well, like... The best European cinema is all like lingering on faces, basically. In the golden age. But now, where are the faces worth lingering on? That's the thing. It's like there's a chicken and an egg problem, but but just simply recognizing that as a value ends up, creating it.
Yeah.
Because you can find faces if you know if you're looking for faces.
That's right.
But if you're not looking for faces, you're not going to find them. So,
I mean, are we interested in human beings anymore?
well, that's the big question, isn't it, Drew?
I am.
I am too, because because we're writerly millennials. We were brought up thinking that there was going to be a human race in our lifetime,
Or that there was something called the human condition. You remember
and there was
that?
a human condition that was that was kind of like there was a social agreement that we were all sharing it, and that we can't really pretend it's not there. You know, we have to kind of reckon with it. There's a word that you can use much more frequently than I can use, but in that particular instance, it was natural. But there was a sense that, okay, we're all kind of responsible for dealing with this human condition in our various ways, bringing to bear what we can and trying to examine the truth of it and acknowledge the truth of it. And then it turned out that no, there was another plan, which was to deny it altogether and pretend it doesn't exist. And then potentially just destroy it or reprogram it into whatever is the grand transformation supposedly might be right now, which I don't necessarily think is going to happen, but there's so much that indicates that human nature is going to be flattened and fixed. I don't know. We'll see.
I still believe there's a human condition. I still believe that for all of the many and extravagant and eccentric and very real differences between people across time and place and all the rest of it, if you're in the presence of another human being, you're in the presence of a contemporary,
right,
with whom you share infinitely more than you would imagine.
Right.
If you can talk in the same language, but maybe even with a translator for any length of time.
Right. Yeah. If you could talk, well, one thing we'll find out some things, because it does seem like we'll be talking in the same language pretty soon with everybody. Yeah. It seems like there will be effectively one global language, and the curse of what was it? The Tower. Yeah, the curse of Babel will be reversed. I mean, that's how it looks like.
God ended it once.
He'll find another. I'm sure he'll find a way to pull the plug on it again. But that's where it's trending, is that we'll have a little thing that anyone will be instantly translated to us, and so we'll see if there are kind of horseshoes back into old school humanity via these newfangled. I don't like to be gloomy about everything or fatalistic about everything, simply because I know that history is full of surprises, and a lot of developments that seem to be absolutely catastrophic turned out to simply be, mixed.
Or things that promised to be revolutionary ended up doing very little.
Being nothing. While other things.
What was that thing when we were in Washington that came out?
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama. People ride on it. It's just one wheel. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, is it the scooters?
That thing.
Yeah. The Segways
Remember that was going to transform cities.
Yeah, I remember. Only the weirdest people ended up getting a Segway. I remember some really weird people in college and stuff who had a Segway.
Yeah.
It always freaked me out. Like, I don't want to walk 80 miles an hour down the street. That just doesn't seem like it can go anywhere good.
So in your world, or out in your part of the world, the screenwriters killed AI writing scripts or something, right? In the latest round of negotiations.
I don't know
it seems like this just needs to happen across the board.
Right. Well, problem is, I don't know how much they killed it, because they're still using it as like an assistant. But I think that it can't. But the question is ultimately, what difference will it make? I mean, if you use it as an assistant, it's a big question. I don't know if it can be killed. I don't know if anything can be, back in the box and killed. I think it can be killed ahead of time. Certain things can be. There's no way that AI is going to Well, I shouldn't say
It's
no.
already it's in everything.
It's in everything.
I was struck by watching the Olympics. It seems to me like it's the number one advertiser
Is AI
during
stuff?
the Olympics is
Yeah.
AI related
I
technology.
mean, it could be a giant bust, but ultimately, compared to what its promises are, because it's not. Forget all these. These are all just like, these are kind of all beta level things. The ultimate promise of AI is that it's going to run everything, and it's going to require at least double the electricity we currently have existing, which is why that's such a big issue politically. How are we going to get the energy to run it? But the idea is that it's going to, all these like engineering, all these things are going to be AI. Like we're talking about stuff that's close to our hearts, like writing and stuff. I still have, I mean, I don't know, it's been like, 2 years now where people have been finagling with these programs. I still haven't seen anything that's really impressive yet. But the threat is that when combined with robots and speech, they learn how to be your little companion.
Yeah.
Are you going to, is that going to replace your need for human companionship? And some people are saying, yeah, people I respect are saying, oh, it absolutely will. And that's the part that I don't particularly buy, because I haven't seen anyone yet fall in love with anything that's not alive. You know what I mean? I just haven't seen it yet. When it happens, it'll be the first time. So there hasn't been a beta. Usually there's like a beta version where, somebody's really in love with their Alexa. No one's in love with no one likes to talk to their phone. They hate Siri. It doesn't seem right. So now maybe if you put it in a beautiful robot that looks just like a Somali beauty queen.
This new French film called The Beast.
I saw it.
You see that?
I liked it.
Has that character
Right.
who's
Did you
an
like
example of that. Again, I watched it very late at night.
Well,
and with the volume very low.
Lots of coffee in your system.
Because the kids are upstairs asleep and our house is small. But it was interesting. Yeah.
I mean,
it was. I thought it was sort of like the best version of that kind of movie that I've seen.
I don't mean to oversell it, because it was. I'm so. Anytime I see a good movie now, I'm like, that's new. I'm like, wow. I thought it was well done for the theme.
Yeah.
It was very interesting.
And the time travel thing.
The time travel thing was very well. Speaking of faces, Sidhu's face there's a face, and that's a lot of lingering on her face. So, and her face was also a big statement in that movie, because that face, compared to say that AI assistant, the black girl, who's very, in her own way, perfectly kind of like
by the
creepy.
way, in that movie from last year, Saint Omer, did you see that one?
No.
She's the main figure in this, based on true life French drama about a mother who kills her child.
Oh, okay.
In that movie, it focuses on her. I mean, it's
On
a
her
lot
face.
of her.
Well, her face is fascinating.
Sitting in a box giving testimony.
Yeah.
Or being very quiet. She's got a fascinating face.
She has a fascinating face, and in The Beast, she made it seem appropriately Uncanny Valley, kind of.
Yeah.
And Sidhu was, a helplessly human, which was the whole point of the movie, the premise of the movie. But and it also reacquainted me. It also set me on this Elliot Rodgers kick, because he quoted in that one area. He quoted the Elliot Rodger, one of his YouTube videos, and Elliot Rodger went to UC Santa Barbara, where I went my first 2 years of college, and that kind of forced me to reckon with that story a little bit, because that's also kind of part of the tale of how we came to rebel against humanity, or accepted the rebellion so easily. What is this is this a painting that you?
This is not one that I love. Kalebot, Paris Street, Rainy Day. There was a period of time though here where this painting was on loan somewhere else, and they sent from the Musée d'Orsay the best Kalebot painting, which is that one of the guys scrubbing the floor of a ballet studio.
Yeah.
Forget what it's called.
I don't know if I've seen it.
It's not a ballet studio. But
I don't know if I've seen it. Maybe
I like paintings that show people working.
Right.
There's so few of them, it seems to me.
That's a good point.
That's precisely why I don't like this one. because these people don't have to learn.
No, they don't. They're just Parisian.
Yeah. This one's too much like a Renoir.
Yeah.
Who's hit or miss. I mean, there are moments when he captures a feeling of a summer day or something in bright light that resonates. But
well, and the question of this painting is, what the hell are they looking at? They're looking at something that's caught their momentary, fleeting attention. It's interrupting their ennui for maybe as little as 15 seconds.
What do you think it is? Maybe it's just the atrocious vision of a horse defecating on these beautiful cobblestone.
Right. It could be something as dark as that, and it could be a particularly illustrious eclair in the window of a bakery.
Probably more like an eclair.
Something,
or
a street performer, or just a really beautiful woman that has both of their attentions equally captured. I guess that's the pool of this particular painting. Would it not be? I mean, it seems to me, no.
Yeah.
I like the way that guy in the middle, next to the lamppost, is looking down. He's kind of the way he's kind of hunching down and thought.
Paris.
Huh?
Thoughts about this time period in Paris. A lot of good movies set during this time.
18th, yeah. Well, including the first part of The Beast is almost in this period. Or was it 1910? Something like close-ish. Wow, he's only 29 when he painted this, or when it appeared.
This 40-year, 50-year period in France are just endlessly fascinating for the promise, right? That there could be a whole bunch of talented people in the same place at the same time that all make each other better as they force each other to distinguish, from the others.
Right.
But also provide support and a lot of time together socially.
Well, it's a shared language. It's like I feel like every art movement in every field is a shared language, and it benefits from having a societal aspect to it, a community aspect to it. You have to have things that you're responding to, and that you can expect responses to, and that you're saying something in reactions. It's like in relation to this. Things don't happen on islands typically.
It's true. And then there grows up a support system, for the art. There's
that.
A bunch of artists together living in squalor.
There's a bunch of artists together, which makes it creates the aura of a thing that's going on.
Yeah, and you don't have to justify what you're doing. Your interests.
No, you don't have to justify it. There's always a reason, even if it's the smallest thing. I've noticed this in every field, from the stupidest to the grandest. Even if it's if there's just 4 or 5 people creating the illusion of a movement.
Yeah.
Look at what about that gory the calf's head and ox tongue. Gee.
It harkens back to the Rembrandt, but with Rembrandt, it's theological. It's about the slaughtered animal is Jesus.
Well,
this is not theological. It's aesthetic.
It's aesthetic, and I think it's also probably erotic, because if you just look at the left, I mean, the ox tongue.
It doesn't work. It's too pretty, for what it depicts.
Probably, yeah. Unless that's his point, is how beautiful. Maybe as we were saying, maybe it wasn't the eclair that you're looking at. Maybe it was a butcher's butcher shop.
They should put that one right over there.
They should. Just have it the right angle to be looking at it.
But, so the movement that all of these artists represent and carried along by, whether or not they knew they were part of the movement or not, it comes back around. It reconstitutes itself in New York in the 50s. Right, with those abstract expressionists, and also jazz musicians.
Right.
And then in Nashville in the 70s, in many ways, with those songwriters that all end up there.
Right. And I've been through that when I left D.C. and I drove back to L.A. I went to the RCA studio in Nashville. I've been to Nashville for a few days, and they let you go into the place, the room where Elvis recorded the Little Susie and stuff. That was a great room. I like recording studios. I like old recording studios.
The 60s and the 70s were something else in Nashville. I mean, I wasn't alive yet, but the Nashville that we know and love now is far removed from that. And yet, that kind of like rootsy, work-a-day mentality of how the Nashville cats made all of those records is still there. You still find it. It's like in publishing how you need a James Patterson to sell 100 million books so that you can publish your literary novel. I don't know if that's still true, but it's in Nashville now. It's like you need the stuff that's on the radio, but that creates the possibility on the fringe of there being some real interesting music.
Is that happening in Nashville right now?
It still is happening, but as the cost of living there increases, it becomes more and more forbidding.
Yeah.
And that was what was so wonderful about it when I was growing up, is that if you wanted to make it in music, you could come with very little and tend a bar, or get some other kind of job during the day or night, and struggle and hustle, and eventually cut some tracks.
Right.
And I wonder if that's true anymore.
I mean, I doubt it. The thing is that well, maybe I know there is some. There does seem to be some a pulse to the country scene.
Oh, for sure.
Which you can say
it's never been more popular than it is right now.
It seems very popular. It's one of these weird things that I've been noticing, like because there's no good new music. There's no young people are discovering old genres, old music.
Yeah.
I just noticed this at the Bob Dylan and Willie Nelson thing, where I ended up talking to a 26-year-old for 2 hours. We were both dancing next to each other about Bob, and he had just discovered him a year ago. I've not discovered him for the first time, but gotten deep into him.
Don't you envy that? Do you remember those days?
Well, I do.
When you first got into Bob.
It was. I do.
And you step in and you're like, oh, this is deeper than I realized.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm sure that I heard lots of Bob and never registered it. But being from Nashville, where, I'm just conditioned. I'm conditioned.
North of Nashville.
North of Nashville. I'm conditioned to hear heartbreak songs.
Right.
It's about love, or it doesn't really land.
Well, that's 50% of all songs are heartbreak. The other 50% are heart mend or heart.
True. So I think for me, it was "It Ain't Me, Babe."
It Ain't Me, Babe.
And so my impression of Bob Dylan was not mainly as the protest guy or the Christian or the hippie.
Right.
But it was, this is a guy who.
Oh yeah.
He's doing that Hank Williams thing.
Well, that's the same exact thing that the guy that the 26-year-old was telling me. He got into Bob Dylan as a way of coping for a major breakup with someone, for a long-term relationship, and I thought, and therefore, Blood on the Tracks was his. That's they call it the breakup album. Although I feel like several of his albums are breakup albums.
It's too easy characterization of that record.
It's also it's too easy. He did sing he sang in the show a very. Early. It's a Saturday.
We should go in here and see some of these Van Goghs.
Yeah.
And the best one's not here. So the one of his bedroom is not here.
Oh,
that's a good self-portrait.
One. Yeah. I've seen that self-portrait too.
This landscape over here, it almost looks as if the paint has not yet dried.
Right.
It's like a still life.
That's the thing about his work in general is it looks like it's dripping like it's alive. The poet's garden.
One of the you're talking about connections, the beast, and that quote, and that leads you down the road. One of the astonishing things that I learned not too long ago about Van Gogh is that, for a time, he wanted to be a preacher like his dad, and he went to London in sort of between the Netherlands and this stint that he had in the coal mines of Birmingham, trying to preach to coal miners. But while he was in London, he went to the Metropolitan Tabernacle where Charles Spurgeon preached. And so there are letters where Van Gogh is writing back to his brother Theo, where he mentioned something that he heard Spurgeon say. And you talk about just two worlds that you would never think of colliding, you know. But to me, I mean, with Van Gogh, it's something all about that religious fervor. That ultimate devotion to something. And I think he was terrible as a preacher. He had no gift.
No gift for preaching. Well,
but he's preaching to a lot of people right now.
Right, exactly. There's
open your eyes, right? He was Annie Dillard before there was Annie Dillard.
Yeah. Well, and the Poet's Garden, and it's funny because I've just been thinking a lot about gardens as the garden, and I think that there is there's a thirst, a kind of desperate thirst for realizing the garden that was lost and, finding it wherever it can be found and kind of communicating what that lost garden was. And this feels like it might have a motivation in that, from that place. And then there's also intellectual kind of angles to the garden question and what made it what it had that we don't have, the innocence of us having the power to name things as we see them based on how we just not having their names influence us, but having us just honestly regard them.
A moment of ideal flourishing.
And there are no animals in this garden.
No animals in the garden.
Yet.
No bugs in the garden.
There's no bugs.
Which I don't trust.
But that's
I write somewhere, I don't know, one of the things about my dislike of William Wordsworth, because in all that poetry about
never a rash.
He never gets stung.
Never a rash, never a sting.
Whereas I just start itching immediately.
Yeah.
I got to take a pill before I go out there.
Yeah. There's no there's no allergies and all that shit. That's what. That's something that Eric Hoffer pointed out too.
Here, let's. We've got how long? 30 minutes.
We got
You keep talking.
Yeah.
Let's go see one other thing.
Yeah. I mean,
I was struck by how loud her voice was when she announced what was closing.
I think there's good acoustics too.
I mean, that's why they hired her.
Yeah. She had to do the scene, and it's a singing contest to get this job. Here's a Gauguin.
No.
These precious ladies of the island.
This is an interesting Georgia O'Keeffe.
Oh,
here in the stairwell. Now, the first time I ever saw this was, a picture of a print of this behind Joan Didion in one of those famous photographs of her in that house that they had
in Franklin, on Franklin Avenue, or in Malibu, or
in Malibu. She's on that awesome leather couch with the tile, and there's a print of this. So when I saw this, giddy.
Yeah. Is there a walk-on water aspect going on with this one?
I think it's looking down from a plane.
Sky above clouds, yeah. Number 4. Yeah. And that's so funny because guess what I was just doing yesterday? I was looking down from a plane at clouds that were covering, and I was observing the plane just go into the clouds, nothing but clouds. So yeah, I landed on this painting.
And how many times have we seen that? And that it's always striking.
It always is striking.
Get over it.
And I was wondering, if you go through a cloud, is there a possibility that it can burst with water? Is that a thing?
In short, though, he's looking at that same view that you just described out the window of the plane. And to him, it looks like bubbles in a bathtub.
Yeah, bubbles in the bathtub.
And he imagines a child pulling the
drain. The drain. That I could see that for sure. Yeah.
Is this where we want to go? I took you the complete wrong way.
I don't know. This is so huge.
It is so huge.
I guess that's why you don't like it as much.
I think it's a hard museum to love. It has its individual moments for sure, but I was when we were in D.C. I became very attached to the National Gallery of Art and the Phillips collection. They were free, which was part of it.
That's part of it, yeah.
But they're small enough.
Right. You can kind of hold the concept in your head of where you are at those.
See, now I'm thinking, do we want to walk all the way back across? Have you had your fill? Or do you want to...
I can do another 15. Well, we only have 15 minutes. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I think...
Oh, no. It's all right.
We need to get our steps in, though, right?
And here's the thing. I haven't even had coffee today because I just got up and, got ready and came.
I'm not going to remember any of this.
I'm not going to remember any of this, but also that first cup. Oh, man, is it going to be good. When I do something before the first cup, as in just exist for 5 minutes before I have it or more, that first cup, makes life worth living.
So, what are your thoughts about Willie Nelson?
Well, that's funny because I was going to ask you the same thing because he's somebody that I haven't, he's one of these, for all the people that I've done my journeys with, I haven't had a Willie Nelson journey. He just happens to be popping up in my life at various points. And the very first point that he pops up is through B.B. King in that song that I cited earlier, Nightlife, which I didn't know he had written, but which I had been not just listening to B.B. King's performed, but performed live several times in my presence. And it's a song that my friend and I both really vibe with because it describes our night owl tendencies, and since high school I've been into that song. When I learned he wrote it, and I like his version a lot as well. I was like, how interesting. When I went to see Bob Dylan in Fresno, 2010, Willie was opening for him. It was like a similar type of show, Summerfest type of thing.
Yeah.
How interesting.
How'd he sound?
This time, he sounded much better than he sounded 14 years ago.
Yeah.
So he's 91 now. And
I don't think he's taken his voice for granted anymore. I think there was a period of time where he
was talking. He was winging it for a long period of time. And that's why, and I appreciate it. I mean, he would appear again, I'd be listening to a Dr. John album, and there he comes up on a song with B.B. King, and they're like trading stanzas or whatever. He just pops up, and a song of his that I really like his version of Blue Skies, which is from 1980 or whatever. It's just this grab bag assortment of Willie Nelson songs, and I know the lore, which is that he united the rednecks and the hippies.
Right.
That's what they say in Austin. And I wanted to. That's what I wanted to ask you about. Is how you would, because I feel like you've actually, know more about the story. Another thing I know about him, another place he appears, is that he did a bunch of albums with my favorite Ray Charles in the 80s, which were a strange departure for Ray Charles, although he'd done country western, of course, in the 60s, but it was a thing where for several years it was all Willie Nelson and Ray Charles. So I was curious with you how you would actually, personally convey the meaning of Willie Nelson. But now is the time to see him. He got sick and he missed some shows, but he's back. He was at the Bowl. He seemed like he was really singing any song might be his last, and that he was so grateful and to be able to still be doing this on the road in 91 and feeling like he's conquered the ultimate thing.
Yeah, I often find myself thinking, just sort of bracing for the news of his death.
Yeah.
Which you didn't think about for a very long time, because he seemed, in as much as a mortal human being can seem kind of immortal.
Yeah.
He outlived everybody else, and he lived harder than all of them.
Yeah.
Good genes, my great-grandmother Bertha, who lives to almost 100, smoking, drinking, cooking everything with lard every day, But so for me, Willie, before the music, was just a figure.
Yeah.
In my childhood, like Johnny Cash. A figure that you would sometimes see around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like those stories of you and Johnny Cash in the bank. I was reading your encounters with Johnny Cash. Cash in the bank was really something.
And like I went to school for a time with one of his granddaughters, and so he was
Really?
Yeah. So he was a grandfather,
Right.
And he was of a generation of country people, country stars, whose music was connected to their lives. Mm-hmm. They all came from out of town, from nothing. Mm-hmm. And they made music out of their own experience in a way that made you think they weren't lying to you, even though they were performing as much as anybody else.
Right.
And so there was a kind of integrity to Johnny Cash. There was a kind of integrity to Merle Haggard. There was an integrity to Willie Nelson. Because there was wisdom. There was wisdom even in the foolishness of a lot of those songs.
Well, there also seems to be, especially with Willie Nelson. I have a question about the Cash thing, but that I'll save for. But for Nelson, he seems to have a very humorous. A lot of his songs are just very funny. Roll Me Up and Smoke Me When I Die. Yeah. Oh, la, 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 10 minutes.
Willem de Kooning, real quick. I don't know what Willie Nelson would think of this.
He's probably seen a lot of versions of this while smoking the,
Well, this is an important
excavation.
I don't know if you've ever gotten into him, but
I haven't. I've again random encounters.
the human form is in there, but it's been dismantled and covered over, and there's a lot of violence in this.
Right. Yeah.
There's also a lot of harmony in it. The more you look at it, it should not work. It doesn't work, and yet there's symphony.
Yeah. I know there is a sort of pattern.
Yeah.
There's a pattern to the
colors, right? To the contours.
The contours, like the torsos. There's the hip, the hip to waist.
Yeah.
There's the hourglass kind of. There is a repetition. The eye, an eye for an eye.
Yeah.
A hip for a hip.
I think of him as being like the last in that line. Maybe it starts with Rembrandt.
Right.
And then you get Van Gogh, and then you get Mondrian, and then you've got de Kooning, all from that part of the world. That part of Europe. We're a long way from Rembrandt right here.
Yeah, very long way. And it's interesting. He's calling it excavation versus deconstruction.
I think that you see some Mondrian, like those boogie woogie paintings that are it's squares of color on a grid.
Yeah.
And it's about jazz music, and it's abstract, but there's a sound to those. There's kind of syncopation, and we've got colors here stolen from Mondrian, if you ask me.
The reds, the
reds,
blues,
the yellows.
The yellows.
So it strikes me as a New York kind of immigrant abstraction.
Dissonance.
Yeah, okay, back to Willie Nelson. So Willie, he will say that his main influence as a guitar player, and you can't just talk about the songs or the voice. With Willie, it's a way of playing the guitar too.
Right.
Was Django Reinhardt.
I don't know.
So we're talking Paris jazz, gypsy guitar player.
Yeah.
You would know some of these melodies if you.
Gypsy sells it. I mean, anything gypsy.
This sort of jazz from the cafes in Paris in the 20s. And
he does have that classical element to his guitar.
Yeah.
What's it called? His guitar, the beaten up
Trigger.
Trigger. Yeah. He has it,
really
but it sounds amazing.
I know.
It sounded great when I heard it in Fresno too. Like when he plays that guitar, and every chord is just like echo through the ages.
But I think jazz. We just keep coming back to jazz. It's in the hopper, I think.
Yeah, it is in the hopper.
I think it's in the de Kooning, and I think it's in Willie Nelson.
It's definitely in the de Kooning.
And I think, what is the appeal of that? What is it about jazz? I think it's the way that it corrals chaos into a form.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, corrals chaos into a form, and I guess it also. I guess it's just like. I think. I mean, so we're talking about with Nighthawks. It also gives. It's a form. It's a shelter to solitude and loneliness that. It justifies being alone, in a way, and every kind of lonesome feeling or thought, which can very easily seem like chaos.
Yeah.
When you don't have a form to kind of, and the rhythm and the pattern and not necessarily a melody, but it kind of like before. It's that period between, depending on what your idea of what jazz means to you. First of all, it's like before you can find a melody, there's a lot of dissonant, not chaos.
It seems to collapse somehow, the distance between feeling, emotion, and performance.
Right. Yeah, you're performing your own grasp for feeling and emotion versus finding the emotion, knowing what it is, and then trotting it out to an audience, perfectly set.
Packaging it. Yeah.
Packaging it in. Yeah.
Yeah.
It gives you it's a stage for the quest. If you're playing jazz, I'm basing with zero musical knowledge whatsoever. A stage for the
the
quest.
improvisatory sort of nature of it. You feel like they're finding something in real time.
Yeah, and even though Bob Dylan says what he does is not improvisation at all, it's the opposite, yada yada, he's also famously always kind of rearranging his songs every time he performs them. And
So frustratingly.
yeah, well, I like it. I mean, I know people find it really
Maybe his
frustrating.
last concert will just be straight versions.
Yeah, well, it might be. He's really, I don't know, when's the last time you've seen him?
It's been a long time.
He's gotten better each time that I've seen him. He's really figured out now what he's doing in terms of in his current form. And he's played a great version of Simple Twist of Fate at this last. He played Ballad of a Thin Man, and his latest tour, which is a departure from, he's been really good. But he's figured out how to, it's not like the 15 years ago where you kind of couldn't tell necessarily what he's saying and what's happening. It was hit or miss. He's really kind of figured out what he's doing right now, and it's worth seeing him when he comes through.
And I think that he and Willie share that. This sense that the music is part of something larger than the music, right? They're on a journey, it always seems like. And so you follow them, if you follow them for any length of time, through periods when their brilliance is on display.
Yeah.
And then through periods where they're disinterested.
Yeah, yeah.
And it does feel a bit obligatory, and they have almost a kind of animus towards the thing that they're being asked to do. But they keep going.
They keep going because they're endlessly searching.
And they do find it. Again.
They do find it, and he's found it. And you know what is now apparent, the key quest that he was on in the 2010s, to singing all those Sinatra songs. He released 5 albums of the classic American songbook songs. Oh, there we go. There it is. This is what we're looking for.
So Robert Ryman almost exclusively painted in white. He's from Nashville originally.
From Nashville.
And was huge into jazz. One of those
White
guys
jazz.
that got into
Why?
Doorman or something. This one is a little underwhelming. But he does it every which way.
Right.
Just committed to his bit.
This is like the opposite of what everyone posted on their Facebooks 4 years ago, This little white square. He just died a few years ago. Okay. Nashville skyline, white.
Yeah, Willie, he's a hero for so many people for the way that he liberated himself creatively, right? Liberated himself business-wise.
Can you tell me what happened?
Because he basically said, I'm not going to let Nashville dictate the terms by which I make my music. Okay. And so in the 70s, he leaves Nashville, and it's more complicated than that. It has to do with personal reasons, too. There was a massive fire at his farm. That sort of catapulted his move to Texas into faster gear, but he makes this series of records in the 70s that are just brilliant. And the reason that they're brilliant is because they're so simple. Nashville at that time was gassy. You tended to have an orchestra, sort of, behind the twang.
Oh, Grand Ole Opry.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
And Willie basically makes this series of records which are front and center, right at the core. Sometimes exclusively, it's just him and that guitar. And he's singing his heart out. And these 3 records, it's Phases and Stages, Shotgun Willie, and then The Redheaded Stranger. These are kind of the records that make him, turn him into an icon. This sort of picture of this, renegade, hippie.
Yeah.
Or outlaw, and here comes outlaw country, but if you listen to so many of, so there's interesting things on each of those records. Phases and Stages, which most people have never listened to, it's a divorce record, and half of it is told from a woman's perspective, half of it's told from a man's perspective.
Interesting.
And it's got this almost like Broadway mechanism musically through it, where he reprises the same chorus, every 3 songs, something from the first of side A will come back in.
Right, interesting.
And then Shotgun Willie is really interesting because it's got Muscle Shoals musicians on it. He recorded a lot of that one in New York City. And the very first song on that record is called Shotgun Willie, and the first line is, Shotgun Willie sits around in his underwear,
right,
pulling out all of his hair. You can't make a record if you don't got nothing to say, but that's exactly what he's doing.
Right.
So it's a meaningless.
Interesting.
It's a song. So in many ways, it's a song and a record that is a slap in Nashville's face, because it's saying, "Watch me make music. It sounds pretty good,
right?
About nothing."
Right. Interesting. So, I'll have to listen to these albums on the way back.
They're not all like that. I mean, Whiskey River's also on that one.
He opened the show with Whiskey River.
Yeah. So I think for a long time he would play that one 3 or 4 times. It's like the way Jay-Z and Kanye used to do that one song over and over again.
Oh yeah, I mean, some of his songs are. I mean, but there's that candor. There's that comedic candor and self-deprecating. There's a song he does where he's like, it's hard to be humble when you're so perfect. Like, that's how he did. He played that one too. Very funny and just like, yeah. I mean, it feels like what country's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And he has a good song, a new one about the border. He didn't write it, but
that whole album is interesting. It's definitely, it reminded me a little bit about, it's a little bit more spare.
It is.
The way it's arranged, a little bit like those Cash American Recordings albums. What is the best way to get back to your area? What are you hungry for?
I'm hungry for anything. I could do like diner style stuff. I can do anything. The best way is the train.
Let's go do the train. I've never taken the train in the city.
Oh, really?
Out of the city.
Okay.
If you listen to podcasts for cleanly packaged information, policy proposals, research reports, and the latest news from World War II, maybe this isn't the episode for you. But if you're curious how certain people can survive an imagination desert, if the secret ingredient of the anti-DC dote concerns you at all, then perhaps you'll join my patrons next week for the continuation of this reunion as it exits the Art Institute of Chicago in pursuit of a cup of coffee and maybe a burger and a fried bologna sandwich, as it passes through the gallery of catching up into exhibits on Jesus, envy, and the smell of old people, an installation of an old friendship that ends up, quite unconsciously, inside of the very painting where this episode began. A painting come to life, with a twist, the way paintings sometimes do, on filthy Armenian adventures.
Shotgun Willie sits around in his underwear, biting on a bullet, pulling out all of his hair. A Shotgun Willie's got all of his family there. Well, you can't make a record if you ain't got nothing to say. You can't make a record if you ain't got nothing to say. You can't play music if you don't know nothing to play. A shotgun Willie sits around in his underwear, biting on a bullet and pulling out all of his hair. Shotgun Willie's got all of his family there.
On the next Filthy Armenian Adventure.
I became a Christian when I was 14 years old. I had this strong impression that something was off with me.
This episode of Filthy Armenian Adventures was recorded live at the Art Institute of Chicago, guest starring Drew Bratcher, author of Bub, Essays from Just North of Nashville. This episode is brought to you by the rug merchants, cigar singers, and oligarchs of the night who subscribe to the show on Patreon. To join their elite society, become a patron of the arts at patreon.com/filthyarmenian. In the words of Bub, if we had biscuits, we could have country ham biscuits if we had country ham. To be continued.
A shotgun Willie sits around in his underwear, biting on a bullet and pulling out all of his hair. A shotgun Willie's got all of his family there.